Live now look there over the New York City skyline. And of course, we know that this time of year, the crowds are quite intense, especially in Midtown Manhattan, which is just yet another wrinkle in this story today of the shooting death, early morning hours of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson, 50 years old. He was in town for this investor conference. He'd been there since Monday. And he was pronounced dead at the hospital after being shot twice here. But the manhunt still ongoing. Like I said, though, before the break, want to go out to the scene where this happened. Remember, it was outside of the Hilton Hotel there in Midtown. That's where we find Fox News correspondent, our friend Connor Hansen. He's been there for quite some time, and he joins me. Connor, good to see you here. It's just such a tragic set of circumstances, so shocking here. What have you seen today?
Well, Andrew, we've seen this entire section of 54th Street shut down up until a couple of hours ago. It's wide open. We have traffic moving across this Midtown Hilton now that police have reopened it. But this manhunt is still very much underway for this suspect who police say killed this person, this CEO, in broad daylight, not quite broad daylight, early in the morning, but this was a targeted killing this morning right outside. This is the holiday season. Millions of people come here during this few months with the tree lighting tonight for these tourist attractions. These are all hotels, offices. Our office, as you know, just a few blocks from here. An all-out manhunt Wednesday in New York City for the suspect who gunned down the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. Brian Thompson was shot and killed outside a hotel where he was set to speak to investors.
I want to be clear. At this time, every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
Police say a masked gunman shot Thompson in the back before fleeing on foot and then riding an electric bike to nearby Central Park. The 50-year-old executive was rushed to a nearby hospital but did not survive. The NYPD says it doesn't have a clear motive for the shooting.
It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes. And as the victim was walking to the conference hotel, the suspect approached from behind and fired several rounds.
Police say the gun jammed before the suspect cleared it and started firing again.
At the scene, we recover 3 live 9mm rounds and 3 discharged 9mm shell casings.
We have the drones up, we have aviation out, we have K9 out.
Thompson did not have a security detail with him, and his wife told NBC News he previously received threats but did not alter his travel plans. And again, this shooting, which happened on the sidewalk right behind me, happened just a few blocks away from Rockefeller Center, where thousands are gathering right now for the annual Christmas tree lighting. Police have said that event is going on as planned with its usual heavy NYPD presence. Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, Connor, you alluded to the fact that this is really one of the busiest times of the year, especially in New York City. And tonight, of all nights, the lighting of the Rockefeller Christmas tree there at Rockefeller Plaza. I wanted to ask, though, what is the message the NYPD is trying to send to just your everyday New Yorkers? Is it go about your daily lives and be wary and cautious? What is it?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Andrew. From the get-go, they wanted to stress the fact that this was a very targeted attack and murder. They were saying there isn't much of a threat to the general public here, even though they are searching for a killer who could be somewhere in Manhattan still, potentially. But this is one of the, if not the most busy nights of the year here in New York City, and the last thing they want is to cause panic. But it does seem people are going about their daily lives here, occasionally coming in to check on what happened. But if you look behind me, it doesn't look much different than any other night, except for all the news crews here.
And Connor, from what we understand, that investor conference was canceled because of this, right?
Yes, that's certainly what it seems like, although we have seen people coming in and out of the hotel. It seemed like they were connected to that conference. But as you can imagine, a shocking day to wake up, especially for his colleagues this morning in the hotel who got the news early this morning from another one of their top executives that this had happened. You know, we heard reports of them calling home and saying that, you know, it wasn't them, telling their families that they're okay. So definitely a really tough day for all of UnitedHealthcare and, of course, the family of this CEO who was killed.
Yeah, and Connor, just lastly, will we hear from the NYPD anytime soon? Any press conferences on the horizon?
I haven't heard of any plan for the rest of the tonight. Of course, if there is a major update, we will expect to hear about one. They have said they do think they will catch this person soon or find out who this suspect is. But so far, we haven't heard a whole lot since that last press conference, which was around 11:30 this morning here at New York time.
All right, Connor Hansen there live for us in Midtown. Connor, thanks for those updates. We'll check in soon.
Thank you.
All right, in the meantime here, we do want to stay with this story. It is the top of the hour. We'll be bringing in momentarily a law enforcement and firearms expert. I know you have a lot of questions on this, so we're going to get that guest situated. David Katz, he's a familiar presence and face on the program here at LiveNOW. In the meantime, in the middle of all of that, we do have some of these live pictures, including in New York City at the moment. This is right outside of the Fox News World headquarters. And you can see the crowds that are just lined up, and they want to see the Rockefeller tree lighting. They also want to see some of the other Christmas decorations that are on display. Now it is that time of year. So look at all of those people. Remember, if you're not familiar with New York City geography, the Rockefeller Center is 1 avenue over. That's 6th Avenue. It's more closer to 5th Avenue. And so you can see there the enormous crowds. It's now 7 o'clock there in the Big Apple. So we're going to leave that up. We're going to leave that shot up. We're going to bring in some of our guests here to answer some of your questions. We also want to let you watch some of this just incredible video of the moment that was captured, the shooting on video. So we're going to show that as well. Viewer discretion, of course, is advised, and our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers go out to Thompson's family, his friends, his colleagues as well. This is such a shock to this community. All right, and if you're just joining us here, I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us. We are in a new hour, 7 o'clock there in New York City. We're going to stay with this story. We just spoke with Connor Hansen there outside the scene of the crime on the sidewalk outside of the Hilton Hotel there in Midtown Manhattan, where UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down in the early morning hours. I do have on the line with me our friend, law enforcement and firearms expert, David Katz, who joins me. And David, it's been a while. You have been talking about this story today, and we definitely wanted to get you on to talk about where the investigation stands, where the manhunt stands, what goes into a manhunt, also the weapon that was used. We're learning a little bit more details on that. David, good to see you here. What we're going to do, though, David, right now, is I want to put up this video that was obtained by the New York Post. This is the moment the shooting happened here. I want you to watch, and then I want you to respond and tell me what you're seeing here. So there you can see that is the suspect right there with the gray hoodie and the gray backpack.
Yeah, that's right after. Yeah, it's right after. Oh, here he is.
Go. Now, David, when you see that weapon, and it's not a very clear picture, but you saw the shooting take place, what goes through your mind? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, that's interesting. I just noticed something I didn't notice before. Okay, so earlier when I first saw the video, it wasn't this clear. it appeared to me that there's no doubt the weapon was suppressed. I will guarantee that. You can see the suppressor.
And just to stipulate, the NYPD has not confirmed suppressed or silenced. They have not confirmed that that was an attribute to the weapon. You're saying without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. Either this is Wyatt Earp's Buntline special, or it's that, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator, the 45 long slide. That is a suppressed weapon. I have no doubt. And I'll tell you what I just noticed that it just occurred to me. People have been opining that the weapon malfunctioned and he cleared it, indicating his proficiency with firearms. I think he's been, okay. So when you put a suppressor on a weapon, and it's not a silencer, there's no such thing as a silencer. It simply suppresses the sound, much the same way as if you put a gun and held a pillow over it, it would muffle the sound. The dynamics of the weapon operation change, and often you'll get malfunctions unless you've matched the suppressor to the weapon, and it's a particular kind of ammunition, and that will ensure functionality. This guy, I think, was prepared that every time he fired it, he would have to manually chamber the next round. In other words, he's not clearing the weapon in a way that would typically so when you clear a malfunction, you have two types of malfunction, stage 1 and 2. The first stage 1 malfunction, you do something called tap rack bang or tap rack target. That's the weapon malfunction drill taught to every law enforcement, every military, every civilian shooting class. He doesn't tap the bottom of the magazine. He fires that round, takes the slide, moves it rearward, chambering a next round like he was prepared for that to happen. That's interesting. So I think I'm standing by my opinion. I think it's a suppressed weapon, and I think he knew he had to chamber it.
Okay, so there was a lot in there. I want to get into this because the NYPD says this was not random, that they believe or led to believe that this was targeted because the suspect, the shooter, was lying in wait, so to speak, waiting for his potential target, i.e. CEO Brian Thompson here. If that is the case, does it speak to the sophistication or lack thereof of some type of suspect and shooter like this who doesn't know or does know their way around a weapon of this magnitude, that it did possibly malfunction? Does the fact that it might have malfunctioned speak to the level or skill of the suspect with the weapon or not? Could happen to anyone.
Oh, yeah, but like I said, I think it definitely malfunctioned in the sense that it was not operating in the normal way a semi-automatic pistol operates. You press the trigger, the round is discharged, the bullet leaves the barrel, and then the pressure caused by combustion drives the slide rearward. One of the things around the empty shell is extracted, ejected, and a fresh round is taken from the magazine and loaded into the chamber. This guy pressed off a shot, inverted the weapon, grabbed the slide, racked it in. So he did that manually. I think he was prepared. I think he worked with that suppressor, and he knew that would happen, and he knew that was part of the function. You mentioned sophistication. I would say this is a very highly motivated individual. Witnesses put him across the street watching the hotel the entire night. Now, New York, just 2 nights ago, I was in Manhattan. It's in the 30s at night, and that particular area, it's not very well. I mean, it's pretty exposed, so you got a bit of a wind. So you have someone who's standing over all night long, waiting for 6:45 when this guy gets out. And by the way, I'm sorry to run on, but he walks out at 6:45. Where was he going? Was there any? I'm assuming he could be going to have breakfast, for all we know. Did the shooter know he was going to leave at that time, or did somebody tip him off that he would be leaving? In other words, how would he be prepared for this person to know that the CEO was going to be leaving and walking alone? He could have left with other people from the conference. He could have been surveilling them for the last couple of days and got an idea of his habits. So that's very interesting as well.
Yeah, I want to just go back to the weapon itself because I want to talk about the level of sophistication, someone might have if there were a suppressor or silencer on it. Do you necessarily need to be trained, highly efficient with some type of attribute or add-on to a weapon, or can you make them at home?
Well, no, I mean, by the way, a very, very serious federal felony manufacturing a suppressor. Can it be done? Absolutely. I've had cases where homemade suppressors have been have been created. And by the way, if that was the case and they identified the suspect, any tool he used to work on that object, if that in fact happened, the ATF will come in and they'll match the tool to that weapon. So that's possible. But weapons are a lot of pistols, for example, they come pre-threaded. So you buy a suppressor, which by the way they're controlled, so there'd be some hoops to jump through there.
Yeah.
But you would have to go to the range, you'd have to shoot it and get familiar with it. That's all.
Yeah.
You're not highly sophisticated.
Okay, so David, we do know though that shell casings were recovered at the scene. What can investigators glean from them?
No, okay. So there'll be each shell casing is going to have a mark. It's going to have a mark where the striker or firing pin struck the primer. That'll be unique to the weapon. It'll also have marks where the extractor grabbed the rim of the casing, and where the ejector struck the side of the casing and it knocked it out of the weapon. That's the ejection process. So each one of those shells are going to bear marks that are going to be able to be traced back to the gun from which it was fired, if they in fact ever recover it.
Yeah, we're just seeing some video aerial footage earlier this morning of the scene itself and the ambulance there. He was pronounced dead at Mount Sinai Hospital. And I lived in New York. You said you were just in New York. This is a very heavily trafficked area in the city. This is Midtown Manhattan. It's not too far from Central Park. Yes, it was early in the morning, so presumably not many people would be around at 6:45. But the gall, kind of conviction it takes if you're this suspect to carry this out on the sidewalk outside of this hotel is just so glaring to me and so shocking to me here. I want to talk about the NYPD's response to this in the press conference that they had. Obviously, the NYPD has been through a number of interim leaders throughout the course of the year. The new leader, Jessica Tisch, was just announced 2 weeks ago by Mayor Eric Adams here, and she probably has her work cut out for her, and you probably watched the press conference. What did you glean from the press conference about where this investigation goes from here? It was only 5 hours since the shooting took place when they held that press conference. We also learned a cell phone was recovered nearby here. What else struck out to you there in that press conference? Is the NYPD equipped, is what I'm asking.
Oh, in spades. They are absolutely, as far as this type of investigation, there is no one on the planet who can do it better than they can. Just the sheer number of officers they can dedicate to the task, that's pretty impressive. So, you mentioned the phone. We don't know they haven't managed to tie the phone to the shooter. So it could have been a burner phone. It could have been someone dropped the phone, or it could have been the shooter could have planted it deliberately as a ruse. So we don't know much about that. But with respect to what the NYPD is doing now, they've got camera footage, and they've got camera footage not only that they've shown you, but up and down the avenue, all the side streets. So what they're doing is they're pulling camera footage from city cameras, from privately owned cameras, and they're going to go through that, and they're going to follow this guy. They're going to backtrack as far as they can to try to identify where did he come from? Did he come out of a subway? Did he come out of a hotel? Did he come out of a cab? Did he come out of, they're going to figure out, a few things. They're also going to figure out how he got the bicycle.
David, we know he used one of the city bikes in New York.
Right.
Which New Yorkers use each and every day to and from work. And you see him on the city bike here. What can they glean from the city bike? Depending on his method of payment, can they trace anything from that?
Yeah, I mean, typically you need a credit card to get a city bike, but you see a lot of people. Street guys have the bikes, and they'll let you. They'll give them to you for a couple bucks. So I don't know how he got it, but if he paid for it with a credit card, it's a no-brainer. So that that's going to be very, very interesting. If you look at what he did, he went to the park. They get him going, so he'd be heading northbound from that particular area by the hotel. It's only a couple blocks to get to the park. It's 5 blocks away. So once you get to the park, he could have jumped into the park. You get behind a couple trees or a bush. That backpack likely had a change of clothing. He may even had a sack to put the old clothes in and put the bag in. So now he leaves the park. He's dressed completely different. What are the NYPD? What are they looking for? They're looking for a man dressed in dark clothing with that distinctive backpack. Now all of a sudden they come back, you guys got a bright blue jacket and a beanie cap. So, but what they're going to do is they're going to be looking at every single face, everything they can. Anyone who went into that park or in that area, they're going to be on camera. If he did change, they're going to be able to figure out, oh, it's the person. How? Because the technology you mentioned earlier, it picks up the way a person walks, their gait, their height, their breadth, any part of their body exposed, they can do comparative analysis on. So this is going to, I think they're going to get them.
So, David, what did you make? I don't know if you saw this. NBC News was reporting they spoke with his wife, his widow now, unfortunately, Paulette Thompson. She said there were some people that had been threatening him. What did you make of that? And I wanted to ask, too, because we know he had security sometimes. I mean, he's a high-powered CEO. Not all the time. The conference there in New York was canceled there after the shooting here. And we don't know whether or not this suspect acted alone, the motive of this suspect. There are still so many more questions here. And the manhunt is mere hours old. So do you anticipate, yes, these stories can be fast-moving, but do you anticipate any updates in the next couple of hours? I know I'm asking you to read the future, but knowing how these go, do you?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, right now, the detectives in charge of this investigation, they are, you know, it's like a bloodhound that just caught a scent. So, I mean, my guess is we'll know something further by the end of the day. If I was this guy from, I know you know New York City. So once you hit the park, it's only a couple blocks west to get to Columbus Circle. From Columbus Circle, you've got the subway hub. You got the 1 train. You got the A and C train. You got the B and D train. You could be heading downtown. You could hit Penn Station. From there, you get the train to both airports. This guy could be anywhere right now, and he would be. This is how quickly he could do it. He'd be in the airport before the police department actually gets their the teeth deeply enough into the investigation to start saying, okay, this is what we should be looking for.
Right. I mean, pardon the cliche, but it is trying to find a needle in a haystack in the biggest city in the country here for this, assassin, the suspect who, and we can show it again. I mean, this brazen shooting this morning. For this really extremely important individual. Obviously, he leads one of the nation's largest healthcare companies here. David, can't thank you enough for your expertise. What do you have your eye on? I'm sure we're going to be speaking again if there are any more developments, but what do you have your eye on in the interim?
Motivation. And yeah. I mean, the individual clearly had, the shooter knew his way around firearms, was highly motivated, and planned it meticulously. So the question is, was this a paid assassination? Oh. Was this personally motivated? I mean, there are a lot of very capable people out there. I mean, could it be someone's denied care and has a grudge? It could be a personal matter. Well, I'd like to see, and I'm sure, and they're already well into this, answering this question, but the motivation, why the criminal intent, what that was, that'll shed a lot of light.
I mean, will investigators, though, be interviewing his family, his friends, his colleagues for more information? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. They've already spoken to the widow. They've spoken to his coworkers. Yeah. They're speaking to. I know they've had a head of security. Why? Like, if he had intermittent security, why not here?
Yeah.
So.
All right, David Katz. Thanks for joining us to break down this very tragic story. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, in the meantime here, I hope you found that informative. And like every breaking news story, information is very fluid, it's very piecemeal, and it's very scant. And remember, this story is just hours old here, so hopefully we'll be getting more details. We'll see you in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Well, our next story takes us to Northern California here in Oroville. I want to put this up. These are live pictures right now. Take a look at this. All right, so this is what we know. We are learning that a suspected gunman is dead and 2 students have been injured after a school shooting in Butte County. Now, the Butte County Sheriff's Office is on the scene there, as you can see. After the shooting at Feather River School of Seventh-day Adventists. This is in Palermo. It's a town of about 5,700 south of Oroville. So we're not entirely sure if the shooting happened inside the school or outside the school. At least 2 students, though, have been injured, and the wounded students were taken to hospitals. We don't know the extent of their injuries, unfortunately. Officials did say that the suspected shooter is dead and likely killed himself that it was self-inflicted. We don't know anything else about the shooter, whether or not the shooter was a student or not. We don't know that. Now, students at the school were being taken to a different location to be picked up by their parents. But sheriff's officials have not provided yet any other information on the shooting. Also, a representative from the Butte County Fire Department did not immediately have any information about the shooting. So just to geographically orient you guys who are watching this right now, this town of Palermo is about 65 miles north of Sacramento. And this is a very, very small religious Christian school, Feather River Adventist School. It only has about 33 students. That's according to figures from the school's website as of 2022. So if you're familiar with Butte County, you can see their parents hugging their children, hugging their friends and family, thankful that they're going to be okay after yet another tragic set of circumstances here at yet another school in the United States. So like I said, we're not entirely sure where on school grounds the shooting took place, whether it was inside campus, the parking lot, what have you. Remember, those details are important. But what we do know, 2 students were injured. We don't know the ages of the students. And the gunman in all of this killed themselves. It was self-inflicted. So you see there a very strong law enforcement presence. You see there, presumably, some of these students. Let's just listen. So from what I understand, this could potentially be not on the campus of the school itself. This could be to the Oroville Church of the Nazarene, which is where law enforcement told parents and loved ones to go to be reunified with their children. So I think that is this location right here. Presumably because the school now itself has become a crime scene, you wouldn't necessarily be able to be this close to the scene. So that's from what I understand. It hasn't been confirmed, but I unfortunately have covered enough of these to know that this is the reunification site. You see there some of these family members, teachers, staff, with some of the children of the school. The Butte County Sheriff confirming what I just had kind of postulated here, that parents are asked to respond to the church to be reunified with their children. The suspected shooter is deceased, and we will provide additional information once it's available. So our hearts go out to this community there in Palermo, California. Just another community ravaged by the scourge of gun violence. These 2 students have been injured. We don't know the extent of their injuries. And the perpetrator of this shooting took their own life. So this is a live picture there. I wanted to get this in. If we do have any more updates from law enforcement out of Butte County, I will make sure to bring that to you. We are hearing from Butte County. Actually, we're hearing from the FBI Sacramento field office. They say this, that they stand with the Butte County Sheriff's Office and Feather River Adventist School families and employees and are providing support to aid our partners and the community during this challenging time. So FBI Sacramento assisting with the Sheriff's Office there in Butte County. So if you're just coming to us right now, this is developing at the moment, that the Butte County Sheriff's Office is on the scene of an active incident involving a shooting at Feather River School of Seventh-day Adventists in Palermo. And the students are being taken to the Oroville Church of the Nazarene to be reunified. We have a live picture there where that reunification process is happening. 2 students injured in this shooting. The shooter taking their life as well. So it seems that this incident itself is now contained and over. And the reunification process goes on. This is a small school, 33 students enrolled. This is a religious Christian school among Seventh-day Adventists. You can see there, presumably some of the children who attend the school. A lot of law enforcement, a lot of emergency management officials on scene. So if there, like I said, are any more updates, we'll make sure to bring it to you here on Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's take a quick commercial break. More top headlines where that came from on this very busy Wednesday when we return. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. We want to keep it moving because there are a lot more top headlines to get to. Let's take it back, though, to Washington. As you know, many of Trump's cabinet picks have been meeting with senators on Capitol Hill, kind of vying for their support, including his pick to lead the Pentagon, former Fox host Pete Hegseth, who has been facing a lot of criticism over some reporting about his personal behavior that has come out in recent days here. But Hegseth penned an op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal, he continues to fight, saying that he's not withdrawing from consideration, saying he's not going anywhere. Although in the middle of all of that, there was a story also late last night in the Wall Street Journal, essentially describing conversations that have been had among Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and President-elect Donald Trump about potentially taking over that nomination if Hegseth does fall here. So Fox 35 Orlando reporter, our friend there, Marie Edinger, has a look at this political saga.
Fox News host, veteran, and Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is in some hot water.
There are allegations of sexual assault, excessive alcohol use, infidelity, financial mismanagement.
Hegseth's mother went on Fox and Friends defending her son from those allegations and from an email she sent him in 2018 saying she was pained and embarrassed by his lies and abuse of women.
Pete is a new person. He's redeemed, forgiven, changed.
Despite that admonition,
the likelihood that the initial nominee, Pete Hegseth, won't get through is pretty high right now.
So, at least as far as the Secretary of Defense position, it seems the president-elect has a wandering eye. Multiple political science professors told me today Florida Governor Ron DeSantis would be a logical choice for Trump's Secretary of Defense.
DeSantis certainly has, national profile. He has military experience.
There's also some chatter about Trump potentially picking Florida Congressman Mike Waltz for the position. He serves parts of Volusia, Lake, Marion, and Flagler counties.
He doesn't have the resume, perhaps, of the traditional Secretary of Defenses that we have seen chosen by both Republicans and Democrats on both sides. Which doesn't mean Trump won't choose him, because Trump is unconventional.
That choice seems less likely, but there is a question of whether DeSantis would want the job. He could simply finish his term as governor in 2026, then head right into campaigning for president in 2028.
I think Governor DeSantis would have to think long and hard if he were offered this position.
All right, Marie Edinger there with Fox 35 Orlando. In the meantime, we want to talk about the hot water that Pete Hegseth is in. We're going to talk about what DeSantis might be up to here. Remember, DeSantis also has this other task on his hands, and that is filling the vacancy that Senator Marco Rubio might leave the Senate if confirmed as Trump's Secretary of State. Well, who will fill that open Senate seat here? Before we get into all of that, we did hear from Pete Hegseth on Capitol Hill today. This is very brief. Let's watch.
Our founders are brilliant in this process of advising consent. It's been edifying and a wonderful process to go through and meet with senators and talk to them, especially members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, whose passion is the Defense Department, and our warfighters, to hear what they want to do to make sure that department is properly oriented for the threats of the world and make sure that we're putting the warfighters first. That's what Donald Trump asked me to do. Your job is to bring a warfighting ethos back to the Pentagon. Your job is to make sure that it's lethality, lethality, lethality. Everything else is gone. Everything else that distracts from that shouldn't be happening. That's the message I'm hearing from senators in that advise and consent process. It's been a wonderful process. As far as everything else, I had a chance to sit down with Megyn Kelly today for an hour. I refer you to that interview. She asked probably all the questions you guys would like to ask.
All right, that was Hegseth's message to the reporters there, taking questions from him, saying that he spoke with Megyn Kelly on her podcast for quite some time. He told Kelly that Trump told him he has his back. Hegseth said that none of the senators he's met with so far have told him to his face that they have concerns. He also compared himself to Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and he also denied having a drinking problem. So like I said, he penned an op-ed today in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, and I want to read one of those paragraphs. He said this: "I've been through a lot. Combat tours, job changes, divorces, and family challenges." He says, "Yes, I love my mom very much, and she loves me." He says, "I've always led with honesty, integrity, and passion." He says, "Tragically, many veterans never find the purpose for their next chapter and succumb to the bottle, depression, or worst of all, suicide." He says, "I understand what they are facing because I've lived it. But by the grace of God, I took another path. My Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, has renewed and restored my life. I am saved by his grace here." That's what Hegseth is doing. That's this track going on Capitol Hill at the moment. But down there in Florida, there is this seemingly alternate track going on as well. We're going to talk about it with our friend there at Florida Politics, A.G. Gankarski. And A.G. joins me. A.G., good to see you here. So I want to set the scene here, and I want to read from the piece in the Wall Street Journal. They broke this story. But before, to set the scene, I want you to respond to what this photo says and suggests. This is from yesterday. Margot Martin, a key advisor to President-elect Trump, took the photo, saying Eric Trump, and Governor DeSantis attend the memorial service of the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office motor deputies who died in the line of duty. We covered that story before Thanksgiving, that tragic story, 2 of them dying in the line of duty here. So Trump and DeSantis were together yesterday, were they not?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, Andrew. They were together at this funeral. We don't know what kind of conversations they may or may not have had at the event, before the event, whatever. But what we do know is that there's reporting all over the place in the last 24 hours that suggests that DeSantis and Trump have been talking about a potential role in the Trump administration. The defense secretary position may have been DeSantis' second choice. He would have been a good attorney general also. But, with the problems with Hegseth's nomination, it appears that DeSantis may be in a position that Pam Bondi was in regarding Matt Gaetz, sort of as the waiting in the wings fallback, who is more of a normal candidate, less controversial. And this is something where, we talked at length about DeSantis and Trump and their strained relationship when DeSantis ran for president. But, when DeSantis endorsed and he, fundraised for Trump throughout the campaign. He was the good soldier, so to speak. And, clearly the president-elect has some confidence in DeSantis. I'm not saying that everybody in Trump's orbit has the same confidence. There are people who work very closely with the president-elect who, have issues with Ron DeSantis, but whether that matters or not is another thing. I think if Pete Hegseth were presenting better as a candidate, if the discussion weren't about his personal issues from years gone by and whether he stopped drinking and so on, this wouldn't be a question. But the reality is there aren't too many votes in the Senate that Hegseth can lose, and he's on the brink. And this is where Ron DeSantis comes into play. He'd be somebody who has been vetted exhaustively. So
because he ran for president.
He ran for president.
Process.
Right. He ran for governor twice. He ran for Senate in 2016 briefly. Congress also. So, Ron DeSantis is a well-known commodity.
Sure.
And he's somebody who has said a lot. I've got a piece coming up in the New York Post in tomorrow's print edition. I'm talking about how DeSantis has actually articulated what he believes the defense secretary should do. In terms of the social issues, taking the woke and the DEI out of the military.
I see.
Recalibrating from a European position to more of a position to deal with China's threat.
I see.
DeSantis talked about a 4-ocean strategy for U.S. deployment. So this is something where Governor DeSantis some may underestimate him, but he's actually articulated a philosophy they would bring into the office, and it is compelling, and it does work with what Donald Trump says he wants to do.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, I mean, does DeSantis even want to be Pentagon secretary there at the Defense Department? So I thought that was interesting. But, back to Hegseth here, according to a source telling Brett Baier, Trump and DeSantis discussed this idea as they met there yesterday in West Palm Beach. But Hegseth has remained defiant, adamant that he's not withdrawing, he's not going anywhere. There were reports to suggest that he was leaving Capitol Hill today to go meet with President-elect Trump. And then, of course, some of those meetings were still on the books. He was not going to leave Capitol Hill, and he'll be doing so throughout the course of the rest of the week. It's interesting to compare his situation to the Gates situation. All the scandal about Matt Gaetz was well documented and well known before Gaetz was tapped as AG and then ultimately withdrew from that. The very opposite is true about Pete Hegseth, at least publicly, with the kind of onslaught and pile-on of stories in the media about some of his personal peccadillos here. So yes, some are asking themselves in the Trump orbit whether Hegseth can survive this. Hegseth says he spoke to Trump and Trump gave him his full support. So we'll see if that changes at any time here. But I want to just kind of dive into the Trump-DeSantis relationship. What is it like at this stage?
Well, they seem to have papered over it. There's been intermediaries who basically have gotten them to talk, and they've had productive conversations throughout this year. And that's really what you want to see for both of them. I mean, the presidential primary had pitched rhetoric, had a lot of nasty talk on both sides. But, once the campaign is over and the poetry of the campaign season, it comes down to the prose of governance. And there is a lot in what the president-elect proposes to do that, falls in the line what DeSantis has done in office. He's bringing Chris Rufo in to root out DEI. That's something that DeSantis did, himself in his second term. These issues come into play, so there is an affinity there. There is a working relationship, and I think that Trump has historically been able to bring in former allies. Marco Rubio had a very pitched presidential campaign against him in 2016.
Right.
But during Trump's first term, Rubio was a go-to in foreign policy, and it looks like Rubio is going to be Secretary of State if he's confirmed, very soon.
Yeah.
So, it's something where Trump does like the sort of team of rivals, and he has said this publicly and privately that when the battle is over, he's ready to make up. It's like a UFC fight.
I mean, look at his vice president, J.D. Vance. I mean, that's an illustration of the point you're making.
Exactly. Vance said a lot of things about Trump, and it doesn't matter now.
Yeah, E.G., the Wall Street Journal has this. The discussions are in their early stages, according to one of the people. That person added Trump has floated DeSantis' name in casual conversations with guests at Mar-a-Lago. So is there an element of this that this could just be Trump being Trump, stream of consciousness, talking off the cuff with guests and members there at Mar-a-Lago, kind of musing about this? The Wall Street Journal also goes further that Trump could decide not to choose DeSantis and select someone else if Hegseth's nomination falls apart. Another possible candidate, they write, who has been discussed by Trump allies is Elbridge Colby. He's a former Pentagon official and ally of J.D. Vance. Also, Trump considering Senator Joni Ernst for the job as well, the Republican of Iowa here. So the fact that this story is even out there, that doesn't bode well for Hegseth's nomination, does it?
Right. I mean, it's kind of like football. If you've got a starting quarterback, you've got a starting quarterback. But if you're auditioning other people for the position, it means the position is tenuous. And that's kind of where Hegseth sit. He looks like damaged goods right now going into this process. There are a number of senators that have voiced concerns, including Ernst. Ernst met with him today, stopped very short of endorsing his bid. Kevin Kramer of North Dakota got Hegseth to commit to not drinking again. And these are not really discussions that you want to be having about your defense secretary or any cabinet nominee. You want to know about their philosophy about the department, what they want to do, what they see, especially with defense, what they see as the posture for the next 4 years. You don't want to be discussing his personal issues. And all the names you've mentioned, Mike Waltz also, who I know pretty well, from Florida. They don't have this kind of baggage that Hegseth has. And they do have a record in, the case of Waltz, Ernst, and DeSantis of governance. You know their political philosophy. You know where they're coming from, and they've been vetted, and there's a few surprises. So there are a number of options that President-elect Trump could pursue if this nomination truly goes south. And if a couple more senators voice concerns, he's not going to be confirmed.
Yeah,
I mean,
and these are Republicans. These are Republican senators voicing concerns. Just to note,
right? He's not going to get Democratic support.
Yeah, to your point, Aisha Hasni on Capitol Hill for Fox said Senator Wicker, the Republican of Mississippi, said Hegseth promised to quit drinking if he's confirmed. Doesn't say he's voting for him, just we'll see what the investigations reveal and how the hearing goes. Aisha had more reporting, AJ, to suggest that this was brought up by Hegseth first. Wicker did not bring this up in their conversation, so I thought that was quite interesting here. But to your point, these are the types and the nature of the conversations you're having about the Pentagon, that is somewhat alarming here. AG, where does Lara Trump fit into all of this? Remember, and I alluded to the fact, and we reported that, DeSantis also has to tap who might fill Rubio's Senate seat if Rubio is confirmed. It's looking like that's going to be quite a surety, that likelihood he will be confirmed here. It's an open Senate seat in Florida, and there are a lot of names being thrown about here. Lara Trump is one of them. Is that a factor in this story, do you think?
I think it could be. I mean, Lara Trump's stock definitely goes up with this potential job in the administration for DeSantis. And, she's made, her intentions very clear. She wants the job. She said complimentary things about DeSantis and his governance. So, you have to consider her to be a leading candidate right now. Other members of the Trump family have obviously pushed this publicly and privately. And this is something where, you could see Lara Trump as the appointed senator. This is not something that a lot of people who are DeSantis fans in the state, the ones you see online especially, necessarily want. They want somebody who actually has roots in Florida and so on. But you'll notice that President-elect Trump announced today that Michael Whatley would be the chairman of the RNC going forward.
Right.
And he said that, basically saying Lara Trump would not be in that role. So there's an expectation that, she's moving on to something else, whether it's this appointed position or whether it's Senator from North Carolina. That remains to be seen, because there's been polling that shows her winning that primary.
Interesting.
But, it really does feel like if you want to do a convenient quid pro quo, and, and this is something that just happens. Lara Trump could be the appointee, and that could open up a lot of doors for, down the road for her in the state.
AG, while we have you, because this is Florida-related, politics-related here, we broke the news yesterday. We brought the news, I should say, that Trump's pick for DEA administrator, Chad Chronister, he's the sheriff there in Hillsborough County, Florida, he withdrew from consideration. And I'm going back to another piece in the Wall Street Journal kind of outlining why that decision was made and what does it mean for some of these picks that Trump is making. Well, Trump responded to that today on Truth Social, and I want to put this up here. So Trump saying this: the Wall Street Journal is becoming more and more obnoxious and unreadable, saying today's main headline is Trump's DEA pick pulls out in latest setback. He says, with all that's happening in the world, this is their number one story of the day. Besides, he didn't pull out, I pulled him out because I did not like what he said to my pastors and other supporters. But more importantly, what's my latest setback? I just won the presidency of the United States. They haven't written a good story about me in years. Somebody over there ought to look at what they're doing. The only one worse than them is stupid, China-centric Forbes magazine here. What does he mean about the pastors and the other supporters, AG, about Chad Chronister?
Well, when the pandemic was beginning, there was a stay-at-home order that affected churches in the state of Florida. And Chronister arrested a pastor who decided to have a service. And the pastor served 1 day in jail, was released. They eventually papered over it. But, when Cronster was floated, this became an issue. People said that he was on the wrong side in the pandemic. It brought up other issues, including Cronster being an Obama donor and, other things like that. So there was a lot of the MAGA movement that didn't like Chad Cronster in that position. Interestingly enough, Governor DeSantis vouched for Cronster. Cronster was very helpful to him politically in these elections this cycle with the state attorney's race down there. But, that being said, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I think ultimately the optics fell into play, and the fact that Cronster would be a tough sell to the base was a consideration for President-elect Trump. There are people who are saying that Sheriff Grady Judd, who is also a Florida sheriff, very telegenic, very good on the mic, might be the replacement for this role. So you can see another DA nominee from Florida. And it's amazing how much Florida talent is tapped for this administration.
No, that's such a good point. A.G. Gankarski, another Florida talent. Always great to speak with you, A.G.
Hey, thanks a lot, Andrew.
All right, in the meantime here, before we go to a quick commercial break, speaking of some of these posts and people that Trump is picking to fill out these jobs, he made a flurry of them today. Yet again here, we've made this graphic just to show you who they are and what positions they might fill. So at the IRS, he has chosen former Republican Congressman Billy Long from Missouri. At the SEC, he has chosen Paul Atkins, and that was reported days ago, really, by Fox Business's Charlie Gasparino, confirmed today by President-elect Trump. Also, Fox contributor and conservative commentator Monica Crowley as the chief of U.S. protocol. Now, during the next 4 years, there will be a number of major events in the United States. Of course, the 2026 World Cup, the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, and the United States will be celebrating its 250th birthday. Monica Crowley, as the chief of U.S. protocol, will be front and center for all of those events. Also, entrepreneur and space enthusiast Jared Isaacman has been tapped as NASA administrator. Also, Peter Navarro, who you'll remember that just this summer was released from a 4-month stint in jail, and who was his previous trade advisor, will be back in a similar role. He'll be a senior counselor for trade and manufacturing. Daniel Driscoll was tapped as the next U.S. Secretary of the Army. And former Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler going to the Small Business Administration. And you'll remember Linda McMahon served in that role in the first Trump term, and she was tapped to be the next Secretary of Education. So those are the main postings that we have from President-elect Trump today. The Trump-Vance transition, working really round the clock to fill out so many of these key posts. The ones that you see in front of us, none of them are cabinet positions, but they're very important nonetheless here. So it's always interesting to see, I missed one there, Adam Bowler. He'll be the special envoy for hostage affairs. So wanted to get that in there as well as we approach the top of the next hour. Let's take our final commercial break. We'll see you in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thank you for being with us here as we approach the top of the next hour. We do want to get back to a story we touched on briefly, emanating from Northern California. This live picture there in Oroville, California. This is, like I said, live. There was reports confirmed of a school shooting there in the town of Palermo, not too far from Oroville. 2 students were injured and the gunman was dead. And so we are hearing from law enforcement there. This is in Butte County. So I believe we're going to be hearing from the Butte County Sheriff right now. Not live. This is re-racked here. We haven't shown you it yet, but this is the reunification site so parents can come get their children after this very, very tragic shooting took place there. We don't know the extent of the injuries of these students. We do know that the gunman who carried this out killed themselves, self-inflicted wound there. So let's get more details from the law enforcement on the scene here. This is from moments ago.
I'm going to cheat over this way a little bit. This is my local media. You always got to take care of your local media first, right? Exactly right. So I'm going to speak, and as I turn, I'm going to make sure.
Do you want to come on this side then, Dan? Because we're a little far.
Do you need to?
We're good. We're good.
Okay. All right.
We're about ready to go now.
What's that?
Go ahead, take us.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to hold it right there?
Yes.
Okay. You're not going to be comfortable like that. Are you going to be okay?
Okay.
Sounds good. As long as you're comfortable. Okay. Good.
Yeah. We'll just start with first name, last name, please.
We'll get there in a minute. Yeah. Good. Good. Oh, we got more coming. Everybody good on this side?
Yeah.
What about you in the back? Are you good in the back? Okay. Not yet. Okay, stand by. Are you good?
I am.
Okay. You got it from the SAC B?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sounds good. Are you recording it?
I am.
If you come over on this side, I'll probably talk a little bit more that way so that we can get the volume on that side, okay?
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Make sure I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody good?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So do you need to tell them? Okay, sounds good. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Honey. I am the Sheriff of Butte County, and I'm here to provide an update on the shooting investigation that the Butte County Sheriff's Office is currently conducting. To begin with, at about 1 p.m. this afternoon, the Butte County Sheriff's Office received 911 calls from a Seventh-day Adventist school located on the corner of Highway 70 and Cox Road between Oroville and Palermo in Butte County. We received reports that there was a active shooter on campus. Law enforcement personnel from throughout the southern part of Butte County responded Code 3 to the school. When they arrived, law enforcement personnel determined that there were 2 students who had sustained gunshot wounds. Both of them boys, one age 6, one age 5. In addition to that, law enforcement officers located an adult male who was down, deceased from what appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Our preliminary investigation indicates that this individual came onto campus to meet with the principal to discuss the possibility of enrolling a student. We haven't verified that that is a legitimate statement at this point, but it is the information that we have at this point. Shortly after concluding that meeting, the principal heard shots being fired, heard screams, and that's when they determined or found that the 2 students had been shot. Those 2 students were transported to area hospitals. They are currently being treated, and I think the fact that they are still being treated bodes well for their ultimate recovery. But given where we're at in this, I don't want to provide too much more information because I don't have a lot in terms of what their status is. The remainder of the students, they were ultimately sequestered in the gymnasium until we were able to bring a school bus in. They were then transported to the Nazarene Church in Oroville, where we set up reunification with the students and their parents who responded to that location. We had at the Nazarene Church crisis counselors, chaplains from local law enforcement, including the Butte County Sheriff's Office, as well as representatives from the Victim Witness Services of the Butte County District Attorney's Office. As it stands right now, we have called in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We are leading the investigation, but they are assisting us. They're providing assistance with processing the crime scene. In addition to that, we are working to learn more about the individual that we believe is responsible for this shooting. We believe we know who the individual is, but we haven't yet identified or conclusively located next of kin. And we're working to delve into this individual's background to figure out what prompted him to do this. We have received some information that he may have targeted this school because of its affiliation with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We have sent out, we are in the process of sending out bolo, or I'm sorry, an advisory to law enforcement agencies throughout California to be more vigilant when it comes to Seventh-day Adventist schools within their community. But I want to caution all of you, this is very early in the investigation. We're still trying to determine what is fact and what is rumor, and it takes a while to do that. I want to be thoughtful about providing the information that I can, but also thoughtful about not providing, making sure that I'm not providing misinformation that gets out. So I would ask that you be cognizant of that. We have some information as well that this individual arrived at the school and was dropped off by an individual driving a gray four-door sedan. I wish I had a better description, but that's the best description that I have. Once dropping the individual off, that vehicle exited school property and traveled towards Highway 70. We don't know at this point which direction the vehicle left in. There is some indication that it may have been a ride-share service. We are at this point trying to locate information about who that could have been, trying to identify that. Part of that is working to get into the suspect's phone, the individual responsible, the village responsible, get into his phone and start looking for contacts and where he may have been and all those kinds of things. That is ongoing as we speak. I believe that is all the information I have to share at this point. We will probably do a final media briefing this evening at 6:30 at the Sheriff's Office, the Butte County Sheriff's Office, located at 5 Gillick Way in Oroville. I'm hoping to have be able to provide any additional information I have at that point, but I want everybody to recognize that there's a lot of things that need to be done. This is still very early on in this investigation. I may not have a significant amount more information to provide to you when we talk again. But as soon as we can verify information and provide it to everybody, we will do so. I'll end with this. If you're the individual that dropped this person off, or you know who may have dropped this person off, please contact the Butte County Sheriff's Office, or if you know who this person was, please contact the Butte County Sheriff's Office. Our phone number is area code 530-538-7322. Again, 530-538-7322. And if you have any other information about this individual, you knew something about this individual, or you could provide some information, please let us know as soon as possible. Again, that's all the information I have at this particular point.
Were the children in recess, or were they out in the playground?
I don't have that information.
Can you just walk us through, I know you don't want us to spread misinformation, but the difference between this was an isolated incident between telling all sheriff agencies to be on the lookout for this?
Yeah, fantastic. So that is a good question. So at this point in our investigation, the information we have suggests that this is isolated to this particular school. However, in an abundance of caution, I want to provide that information to other law enforcement agencies who might have Seventh-day Adventist schools in their communities. I would rather provide that information and allow them to be vigilant and make sure that things are safe at those schools than to hold that back at this particular point. So that's why we've come out with that information.
How many gunshots were let off, and how many gunshots did those two boys sustain?
I don't have the answer to that question.
What kind of weapon? What kind of gun?
At this point, it was a handgun. I don't have any more information about the firearm.
Do we know the relation between the person and the two students?
At this point, it would appear that there was no relation between the individual we believe responsible for the shooting and the two students, or for that matter, the school.
All right, so you've been listening there to the Butte County Sheriff with more details. We have learned a lot since we first brought you this story, and the two children, the two students who were wounded in this shooting, ages 5 and 6. This was an adult male who carried this out. They have an idea of who that individual is, but they have not notified next of kin yet, so they are not releasing the identity of this male suspect, adult male suspect, who you just heard there, they do not believe had any affiliation with this school, this Seventh-day Adventist Christian school there in Palermo, California. And so they believe that this suspect could potentially have been targeting this school because of its religious affiliation. There was some type of meeting going on with the principal of the school, and the adult male had said as much, that he was looking to enroll possibly a child of his at the school, and then this transpired here. So this is a really, really tragic set of circumstances here, though we didn't really get an update on the conditions of those two young boys, those two young students, though you heard there from the sheriff that because they are still in the hospital and they are progressing, that bodes well for the status of their conditions here. So wanted to make sure we got that in. They didn't really have any updates to provide about really the type of weapon. They said it was a handgun, but hopefully more details will be gleaned once there is yet another law enforcement press conference, which there will be. That was confirmed a little bit later on, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific there. In the meantime, I'm Andrew Kraft, and we are in a new hour. I want to thank you for being with us. It's a tough story to tell. We're going to take a break. When we come back, though, we'll be diving into the real estate market, some of President-elect Trump's incoming housing policies, his pick for who he wants to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and overall interest rates for millennials who might want to buy homes and who can't afford it. All of that and more in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's get into more of these top headlines. Live Now look there at the White House. So we've been covering all of these cabinet posts made by President-elect Donald Trump. We want to dive into who he is choosing for Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, former NFL player Scott Turner, to lead that department, and what his housing policies might be in order to somewhat alleviate the affordable housing crisis nationwide by pumping the market with more supply. In the meantime here, we want to talk about that with our friend Pierre Debus, real estate analyst. He joins us. Pierre, good to see you here. It's been some time, but I wanted to get with you on this story because all throughout the course of the campaign, we heard Trump talk about housing policy, though not really public housing to be specific, and you focus heavily on some of this, corporate real estate, office buildings, retail space, and the like here. What do you have your eye on?
Andrew, it's one of the most important, I think, topics going into the new administration is that how is President Trump going to help alleviate the housing crisis we have in this country? And it's a twofold crisis. We have an affordability issue for the majority of Americans, and we also have a housing market which is completely unaffordable for anybody who would ever wish to, and try to pursue the American dream. So I think that when you take things in two different, both topics separately, the appointment of Scott Turner, I think it's a good one. He has a vast real estate experience and was one of the key people in creating the Opportunity Zone program. Now, not that Opportunity Zone program is going to help alleviate the topics we're talking about, but what it did is create kind of a revolutionized area or a program to incentivize development and bring, economic stimulus to neighborhoods that were in need of it. Now, a similar concept will be needed to incentivize developers to develop housing that will be targeted towards first-time home buyers, entry-level buyers in the middle class, as opposed to luxury housing. Now, at the same token, we have to figure out how we're going to create affordable housing on top of this. So I think, creating tax incentive programs and grants for developers who are willing to create affordable housing, whether in conjunction with the program of creating, the housing stock for primary residents or a different program, I think that, both of those two topics are the two most important topics when you talk about real estate going into next year. And I'm optimistic that, Scott Turner can help make a change on them.
But if you're Scott Turner, Pierre, and you're in your first meeting with then now, inaugurated President Trump, what is your first thing you bring up to Trump that this is what we need to do? What would you tell him? What would you say if you were Scott Turner about the housing market particularly? What's the necessary thing to do on day one?
If I had a seat at the table, I would tell him that we're roughly 5 million homes short of current demand levels, and that we need to do two things. One, incentivize developers to develop, or three things, I should say, I take that back. Two, I think we have to regulate Wall Street in terms of their, appetite for acquiring single-family homes as investments. I don't think we want to live in a society where your, average household is renting a $400,000 house from Goldman Sachs. And I think number three, we have to get to a point where we're comfortable with inflation and can actually have real interest rate cuts. The market's not going to move until rates come back to more of somewhat of a balance between, well, look, we're not going to go back and see the 2-3% interest rate environment, but going from 2-3% to, north of 7 was an astronomical jump that had a horrible ripple effect on transaction volumes throughout the country. So I think that you go through those three items, with the last one being the most practical, is interest rates, because in reality, prices aren't coming down anytime soon. And to create the additional supply that we need to meet demand levels will take several years. But what can you do tomorrow to help affordability? You can cut rates to a point where it makes, current valuations, palatable for your consumer.
Yeah, my question, I guess, is this in the remit of HUD, or is this a market-oriented solution here? I mean, can housing and urban development, this sprawling, cabinet position and cabinet post here, can it do much about demand and supply on the market itself? I know really in its remit, it's more about affordable housing, public vouchers for low-income families and the like here. Do they even have a role in this crisis?
I think in providing liquidity, maybe expanding the demographic that would qualify for HUD loans. HUD loans traditionally come at a lower interest rate with less down payment. They require, purchase money, but they require insurance for those loans because in reality, they're high risk loans. So I think that, expanding maybe HUD's purview in that regard, where rates, maybe there's preferential rates, and we expand the income eligibility, because in reality, housing prices have gone up 50 to 100% throughout the country, depending on the location you're in. So, the people who can't afford the housing currently has only increased. So I think we need to expand, the eligibility in that for those programs.
Okay, so one of the, I guess, issues that Axios talks about in this piece from a couple of days ago, we are on the precipice of the holiday season. People are filling out their Christmas wish lists here. But Axios reports more first-time home buyers are turning to their parents to help pay for their starter homes, whether that's down payments and the like. My generation, millennials, a lot are doing that here. We have some stats that as housing costs soar, 26% of younger people who recently bought homes say they used family cash for down payments. That's up from 23% last year and 18% in 2019. You were talking about we don't want Goldman Sachs being the overseer of the mortgage for a family of four on a $400,000 home. But this isn't a solution either, is it?
It's a harsh reality, quite honestly, because, when you take the appreciation of pricing, how does entry-level buyers, millennials, anybody in the mid-20s to mid-30s afford to put down a 10% deposit? Bear in mind, pre-pandemic, your average home price was roughly $250,000 of the country. Now it's roughly $425,000. So when you think about that, right, how long does it take you to save $42,500 to put down on a home in addition to all the other costs? And we've lived in a horrific inflationary environment for 4 years where, even though wages have increased at a significant level, they've increased at a significant level what's been offset by a cost of living in general. So I don't think that, I just think it's a harsh reality. And Andrew, another point to that, when you look at the wealth that's been created over the past 40 years, the transfer of wealth in the next decade will be at a historic level in America. The baby boomer era, is an era where, you're showing images of houses that probably were bought for $25,000 30 years ago. They're now $700,000.
Right.
You may not see appreciation in our economy, in our market like that ever again. So there's going to be such a massive transfer of wealth in the next 10 years where it will help, Gen Z, millennials, in the demographic you're talking about buy. But unfortunately, most of these people don't have a choice. If they have the ability to go to a relative, they have to.
Yeah, I mean, according to Redfin, nationally, the median down payment on a home is $30,397. I'm 33 years old. I've rented my entire adult life. I know people my age in many major cities around the country who still has a roommate or roommates, plural, that they rent still as well. It's becoming more and more of a phenomenon, so to speak, amongst my age group, home ownership. You know, when I see friends online, on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and they have bought their first home, that's great news, but it's few and far between that I've seen.
Right, absolutely.
So, you know, Pierre, going forward, we're mere weeks away from Trump's inauguration here. What else do you have your eye on? Interest rates are coming down, both mortgage rates as well, though. I mean, that's good news, right? Shouldn't it be?
That's phenomenal news. So I will tell you, I'm going into next year with a very optimistic perspective. Well, I always say last year, you had a 30-year low in housing transaction volume in the country, a 30-year low. Let that resonate for a second. Now, whenever you have a dip in transaction volume of that magnitude, the rebound, which you know is inevitable, is going to be a rather sharp rebound. And it wasn't a dip just for 2023. It's been really last 3 years, we've been in a suppressed market in terms of transaction volume. So I think that once, you know, rates do hit a new norm, which all of us are expecting to be in that 4.5 to 5.5 world, prices, you know, hopefully won't appreciate much, and some markets come down. And honestly, we've gone past an election, which, you know, the stock market has responded very positively to, which is only going to help the momentum going into the housing market in 2025. So I think next year is going to be an excellent year in real estate. I think real estate's a backbone of our GDP. And, you know, it's about time we get activity going again.
All right. Pierre DeBus, as always, can't thank you enough. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Great seeing you.
All right. In the meantime here, I hope you found that conversation informative. We do segments and interviews like that sometimes about the housing market, the real estate market. We know you guys are keenly aware, keenly interested in that story and that storyline. In the meantime, though, we do want to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be diving into a key culture war issue at the Supreme Court today, transgender rights. The transgender rights of minors. We'll be diving into that. We'll be hearing from both sides of the arguments today. That and more in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Our next story takes us to Washington yet again. Outside the Supreme Court today, we learned that the majority of the Supreme Court, of the justices today, seemed reluctant to block Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. The justices' decision, which is not expected for several months, it could affect similar laws enacted by another 25 states and a range of other efforts to regulate the lives of transgender people. Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor with more.
Advocates on both sides packed the Supreme Court Plaza Wednesday as the justices hear arguments in a case that will greatly impact transgender health care for minors.
I have kids who need support, and, you know, it changes their lives when you give them this kind of gender-affirming care, and it saves lives.
Children, they can't consent to things like sex or buying alcohol or cigarettes. They can't vote. So to allow them to make a decision that will affect not only the entire course of the development physically, psychologically, and reproductively is completely ridiculous.
This case stems from a Tennessee law that bans puberty blockers and hormone therapy for transgender kids, but allows the same treatments to be used to treat early or late onset puberty. 25 states have similar laws, but the Biden administration wants the high court to declare them unconstitutional and a form of discrimination on the basis of sex.
Law restricts medical care only when provided to induce physical effects inconsistent with birth sex. Someone assigned female at birth can't receive medication to live as a male, but someone assigned male can. That's a facial sex classification, full stop.
But Tennessee argues their law simply regulates medicine based on a patient's age, and that falls well within a state's power.
The Equal Protection Clause does not require the states to blind themselves to medical reality or to treat unlike things the same. And it does not constitutionalize one side's view of a disputed medical question.
The court's ruling will come this summer, and it could have a greater impact beyond health care. The justices may decide whether trans Americans are a group entitled to discrimination protections. From the U.S. Supreme Court, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. In the meantime here, you're going to hear from some of the parties in this case. They spoke outside the court today while oral arguments were ongoing. Let's listen.
General Scretti.
Thank you, Amy. This case is about protecting kids from the consequences of decisions that they cannot fully understand. Kids on puberty blockers and hormone treatments for gender dysphoria face serious risks of losing their fertility forever, of losing their sexual function forever, of dealing with medical conditions for the rest of their lives, including blood clots, tumors, bone density disorders, cognitive development impairments, and others. The medicalization of youth gender dysphoria has moved very far, very fast over recent years. The number of cases has exploded. One researcher identified a 4,000% increase in the number of adolescent girls seeking hormone treatments. And this explosion in cases has been driven by ideological pressure, not by scientific evidence. Over and over, systematic reviews have shown little to no benefit of these treatments for kids. That's why many European countries that pioneered the use of these treatments for kids have recently reversed course and severely restricted them. They looked at the evidence and they determined that the risks far outweighed the benefits. The people of Tennessee, acting through a bipartisan supermajority of their elected officials, made a similar choice. They passed SB 1 to protect kids. Half the states in the United States have done the same. The Constitution allows the states to protect kids from unproven, life-altering procedures based on uncertain science. The states have exercised the power to regulate the practice of medicine for hundreds of years. It's one of the fundamental things that they do. And Tennessee's laws draw a line based on age, which is something that the laws do all the time. The other side argues that SB 1 discriminates on the basis of sex because it prohibits cross-sex hormones for kids. But this misses the common sense fact that boys and girls react differently to different hormone treatments. The law targets the harm. It does not target on the basis of sex. It regulates regardless of sex. As Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the greatest feminist in the history of the court, recognized, there are enduring physical differences between the sexes. There just are. And the Constitution does not require legal absurdity in response to biological reality. The dramatic and unexplained increase in the use of these life-altering procedures on kids is exactly the sort of situation where the state should take notice and regulate. Now, adolescence is hard, and gender dysphoria is a heavy burden, and we need to remember that. But the evidence shows that the large majority of kids dealing with gender dysphoria will grow out of it unless they're put on these medications. Tennessee's elected officials carefully considered the evidence and passed a law to protect Tennessee kids. The Constitution allows this. We look forward to a decision from the court. I am glad to take your questions.
Tennessee law sets a standard for the United States that it should be adopted in other places.
So I think the question was, does Tennessee law set a standard for the United States? In the United States, each state makes its own decisions. Different states reach different conclusions. Different states elect different people. That's the way the country works. Tennessee's standard is constitutional, but we have 50 separate laboratories for democracy. Each state is allowed to make its own decisions. So the question is about whether a heightened degree of scrutiny should apply. I think we made a good argument. The way that you categorize the classifications in the law are going to be driving that. This is a different situation than the court has considered before. We think rational basis applies. We think Chief Judge Sutton got it right at the Sixth Circuit, and we'll see if the court agrees.
How many kids in the state of Tennessee do you think are actually impacted by this? And if the court rules in your favor and allows the law to stand, what should happen to those who have already started undergoing transition services?
So the question is about numbers in Tennessee. I don't know the numbers offhand. With respect to treatment, the law has provisions related to differently situated kids, and you know, the legislature's made determinations on that fact. That's a policy decision for the people's elected representatives to make. It's my pleasure to introduce Attorney General Steve Marshall of Alabama, who is also here to make some comments.
Thank you, General's Committee. First of all, I want to congratulate General's Committee and his team for the presentation today. Very confident in the result of the court. Very pleased with the questions that took place today. One of the things that was obvious to me, however, is the fact that this court did not have a complete record of what we've been able to uncover nationally. It's what I believe is one of the greatest medical, legal, and political scandals that we have seen. Uniquely, the Solicitor General was able to relate, as Justice Alito pushed back on, that there is widely accepted within the medical community that this is an appropriate treatment for kids. That's absolutely incorrect. And I find it highly disingenuous for the Department of Justice to argue that it's widely accepted when the second in charge of Health and Human Services, Dr. Admiral Levine, directly contacted those medical organizations that establish standards of care to have them remove age restrictions on surgeries for kids. You can't have it both ways. And not only did they remove those age restrictions for kids, it wasn't for medical reasons. Instead, it was for the political gain of the Biden administration to push a transgender agenda. It is clear, if you will go to the records on the Alabama Attorney General's website, to be able to see the fact that this is not settled science, but in fact, not only did we hear in the court the reference to what's going on in Europe, but instead you can look at the direct records of WPATH that they weren't seeking systematic reviews of the studies to determine standards of care, but instead seeking the advice of social activists, lawyers, the Biden administration's political agenda, as well as those advocacy groups that were pushing political reasons and not the best welfare of children. It does not go without note that the former head of WPATH, who was designed to set these standards, left the organization because they believed they had become more political than medical. If you look at what we have developed as a factual record, it is clear that Tennessee acted properly, but not only that the 25 other states that have passed similar laws are doing it to protect children. There are vehicles to treat gender dysphoria that are separate and apart from gender, these surgeries as well as these medicines, and we can provide appropriate care for kids. It's also inappropriate to characterize this as a fight between the left and the right. We see many of those in the gay and lesbian community who are equally as outraged about what we're doing with kids. Very pleased with what states are doing to protect children, and Alabama will continue to defend its right to protect our kids.
We also have Attorney General Alan Wilson of South Carolina.
I'm honored to be here today to support Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, in passing reasonable protections for its children. What's at stake here, as the Attorney General of the state of South Carolina, we have a similarly situated bill. And what is at stake right now is, can states pass reasonable laws that protect and promote the health and welfare of children? We pass laws that place reasonable restrictions on whether parents can put their children in the front of the car. We pass laws that put restrictions on whether or not a child can buy a tobacco product or an alcohol product or go into an adult entertainment facility. We do this already as states. It is inherent in states' police power to protect laws or to promote laws and in place laws that protect the health and welfare of our children. We do it already. What concerns me is that you have dueling sciences, you have people on both sides debating the medical nature of transgender. You're having children as young as 6, 7, 8 years old trying to commit or engage in an irreversible medical procedure, and we have people saying that the state should not be able to debate those issues, should not be able to weigh those issues. You're saying right now that a 12-year-old can engage in chemical castration and gender mutilation without having the states debate whether or not they have a right to regulate this. And so as a representative of the state of South Carolina, I'm here to support Tennessee's right to protect the health and welfare of children in the 25 states that have passed similar laws, as well as more than half a dozen countries that have already pulled back these types of laws. So I want to thank the state of Tennessee, General Scarametti, General Marshall, and so many amici states who are represented here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. If you need any information from our office, we'll be here. Let us know. We'll be glad to get that to you. Thank you.
All right, so there you have it from the attorneys general of the states of Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina. Of course, Tennessee defending this ban, this law there that bans gender-affirming care there in the volunteer state. We want to talk about this even further with our friend there at the Heritage Foundation, Sarah Parshall-Perry. She joins me. Sarah, good to see you. You and I spoke about this when news came that the Supreme Court was going to take up this very case, this very issue. Transgender rights, especially transgender rights for minors, is now front and center before the 9 justices on the court. Let's get the timing part of this out of the way here. It's early for oral arguments, is it not?
It is early, but we actually still have a few pending cert petitions in which we're going to see the justices determine whether or not they will take additional cases for this term. And there are quite a number of high-profile cases still pending on a cert petition. But there will be quite a bit of months between their hearing oral argument in this case, here we are at the beginning of December, and when they are likely to issue the final ruling in this decision, which is likely to come sometime toward the end of June or beginning of July in 2025. It may be one of the last, if not the last, to be issued.
So let's break down some of the arguments today proffered by both sides and the justices' reaction to them. What justices were you following today? Because the word that has been characterized to use how they're feeling, or at least how a majority of them are feeling, reluctant. Why?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably good reason to believe that at least 5 of the justices are going to be skeptical of the United States argument, and that they do believe the states have an ability under the Constitution to be able to legislate in such a way as to protect the health and safety and welfare of minors. In fact, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution makes very clear that under a state's plenary police powers, this is one of the authorities that they can exercise constitutionally, but the federal government has argued that this is a sex-based classification. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. The law actually classifies based on age and the use to which they want to put these particular medications, but treats boys and girls the same. And I will say the Chief Justice and Justice Alito were particularly strong in their questioning of Elizabeth Prelogar, who was arguing for the United States. They are clearly not buying her arguments.
So, a lot of times, Sarah, we hear from Justice Roberts, including and especially last term, saying in his rulings multiple times that this is in the purview of Congress. Congress needs to take this up for whatever XYZ issue here. What was so interesting today in an exchange with one of the lawyers for the ACLU who brought this case, Robert said this: the Constitution leaves that question to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor. So he's saying we're jurists. We're not doctors here. But aren't they presented with medical questions all the time?
They are, but it was almost a verbatim quote from the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health decision for 2022, in which the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade and used the language, "This is a question for the people and their elected representatives." The judiciary, and particularly so these justices today, did not seem keen to take this issue away from the format of public debate and scientific evidence and make determinations on their own as judges and not as scientists, not as doctors. They would much rather the people be able to argue these particular cases in the state houses via their elected representatives and via the way of modern science. But this is a very highly controversial area, and the justices are not likely to want to get involved.
Yeah, so according to the Associated Press, the issue in the Tennessee case is whether the law violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which requires the government to treat similarly situated people the same. When you and I last spoke about this case, though, I'd asked you, has the issue of transgender rights been before the court before? And it has briefly back in 2020, I believe, for the Bostock decision when it comes to employee discrimination. But this is about the very essence, the very nature of the concept of transgenderism itself, is it not?
It is. In fact, the question presented before the justices and an argument that Justice Prelogger made, Solicitor General Prelogger arguing for the United States, was that, in fact, transgender status is what she called immutable. Chase Strangio from the ACLU also said that individual believes that he would meet the immutability test. Well, that has been the bright defining line for the Supreme Court in their Equal Protection Clause jurisprudence for decades. Those are characteristics given by accident of birth. And Alito did an absolutely amazing job, essentially deconstructing the argument from Chase Strangio of the ACLU, saying, what about people who are gender fluid or people who are non-binary or who change gender identities further down the road? That cannot be and cannot be protected under the Equal Protection Clause as an immutable characteristic. It is entirely subjective. I think that ultimately is going to play into the justice's rationale.
You know, it's so interesting how, based on the particular issue, the court does have kind of the mechanics in place via these tests and standards that have to be met in order to kind of qualify under the rubric and the definition of what have you here. Do transgender people, though, Sarah, right now have rights under the 14th Amendment?
They do. They have rights under the 14th Amendment, just like every other individual in the United States has rights under the 14th Amendment, including based on their sex, their national origin, their race, those immutable characteristics that cannot be changed, that are derived by accident of birth. They are already guaranteed equal protection of the laws, as every individual is under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. What they are asking for is for this particular Supreme Court to short circuit the democratic process and to give them, as minors who are necessarily subject to less maturity, less intelligence, less wherewithal, to gain access to medications that have not been studied and for which the scientific basis is lacking. They are asking the court to constitutionalize an area that is currently in medical controversy that is not protected by the Equal Protection Clause.
So obviously in our society, that children don't have agency until they're at least 18 or 21 in some cases, depending on what you're talking about here. But Tennessee's law bans puberty blockers and hormone treatments for transgender minors, but not across the board, lawyers for the families wrote in one of these briefs here. So if you're over the age of 18 and you identify as transgender, would you be kind of outlined from whatever ruling is made by the justices come next spring here? Does it include you or not?
No, it doesn't. In fact, there are two distinctions made here under Tennessee's SB 1, which I might add is enacted with bipartisan support. This is Democrats and Republicans who got behind SB 1 and passed it with overwhelming support. It makes two distinctions, one based on age, any individual under the age of 18, and the second based on the use to which these particular medications are put. States legislate constantly on the use of particular medications, seeking their use in some aspects, but not in the other, because again, they have the police power to be able to restrict and prevent any damage to the public health and welfare. That's exactly what Tennessee has done here. Any individual over the age of 18 is free to make their own choices.
Sure, and you heard there from the Tennessee Attorney General, it seems like they just want a regulatory framework to be put in place in order to deal with this. And maybe that's what they mean by saying this is not across-the-board ban of some of these treatments here, some of which, to your point, are seemingly exploratory and experimental here. But I wanted to ask as well about the youth and parents in particular. If you're a parent or parents in Tennessee, and you have a child that identifies as transgender, shouldn't you have every right to do what's best for your child?
Well, that's a great devil's advocate question, but I have written a legal memo and extensively on the issue of what the parameters of the parental right are. Okay. And the Supreme Court has actually held for adults that there is no constitutional right to experimental care. So not only would they not hold that there is no constitutional right to experimental care for minors, they would likely hold that there is no constitutional parental right to get experimental care for those minor children. They are very wary, and there's a general right to be able to direct one's child's medical care, but not insofar as controversial or experimental procedures, which is exactly what gender-affirming care is.
All right, Sarah Perry, you always know your stuff. It's always great to speak with you, and we'll definitely be speaking about this case again. This is going to be very highly watched. Sarah, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
All right, in the meantime here, let's take a quick commercial break. A lot more top headlines where that came from when we come back.